And I think all of the people who are just starting off, they should just do whatever they enjoy doing, but constantly ask yourself if you are being true to who you are and if you are really doing what you enjoy doing. Because the world that we live in, it's very, very easy to start doing something that you never wanted to do in the first place, because there is that one part that gets you validation, that gets you recognition, and then there is that other path, maybe a completely different path, where you and your authenticity and your relationship with the medium of art lies. If these paths converge, great. But if these paths don't converge, then it will be very, very difficult to find meaning in something like photography or any form of art where the only criteria of success is validation from the external world. So do it because you want to be true and authentic to yourself. So a question came about, should photography necessarily be a means to an end, or can it be a tool that we use to understand things better, understand our relationship with the world better? And that question then led me to look through my phone screen, and I saw two images naturally placed next to each other, and I thought, interesting, this might be an interesting way of looking at things. And as I kept on building that body of work, I realized that it allowed me to understand and question the stark contrast that exists in the world that we live in.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Stopping by the Woods. Today, we're in conversation with Manish Vaidya. As nature photographers, most of our images inspire awe, which is largely thanks to the subjects we photograph. Charismatic animals, colorful birds, and the stunning habitats they live in easily inspire awe. But I struggle to convey emotions beyond awe with my nature photography. My dear friend Manish excels at that. He's a nature photographer who is able to convey emotions like joy, hope, and despair with his nature photos, something that is particularly hard in the genre of nature photography. He is also a brilliant natural history photographer. He loves the dry, open habitats of the Rann of Kutch and the Thar desert. His story on desert foxes of India, published on Nature in Focus, is one of the most comprehensive photo essays of the species. During COVID, Manish pivoted his nature photography and blended it with everyday life. He's now taking it forward into a book. Manish and I were colleagues a decade ago. We started learning photography together, with weekend trips to Corbett, Bharatpur, and Talchapur. Even back then, Manish looked at wildlife photography with a different perspective. While the rest of us were looking for rare subjects and sightings to come about, Manish was happy photographing trees and leaves and fog, while creating some of the most stunning images I've come across. This conversation is all about that, creating storytelling images from some of the most common subjects around us. So Manish, good morning. Happy to have you here. Welcome to Stopping by the Woods.
Thank you so much, Anurup. It means a lot to me that you take so much interest in my work and my work resonates with you. I have been deeply inspired by your work ethic, your commitment to nature photography, and the seriousness with which you pursue stories. So it's a great opportunity for me to be here with you and share some of my work. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those really, really kind words. And likewise, your work is something that I absolutely respect because of how unique it is, how different it is from the average sort of nature photographer's work. And I was in conversation with Yashpal yesterday, and we were talking about how beyond a point, a lot of the nature photography can be very similar to each other, and how if somebody in the forest department is to choose a particular image right now, they are spoiled for choices. But the thing about your kind of work is there's barely anyone who's doing those kind of images, and those kind of images are unique. And between, say, a tiger portrait or the kind of nature photography that you do, if somebody had to put something on a wall, they're probably going to be more inclined towards picking up some of the work that you do, which is sort of what is most fascinating to me about your work. So let's get to that. Where all have you been traveling? Have you traveled anywhere at all? Where are you going? Is there anything on your calendar?
So I haven't traveled anywhere recently, definitely not with the objective of photography in mind. And I think one of the things that we were speaking about just before we started discussing this was how, my work has also changed a lot over a period of time. And I think somewhere I've realized that your work needs to exist in the context in which your life sort of pans out. With that in mind, I must say that I haven't traveled anywhere for nature photography particularly, but what that has allowed me to do is explore a lot of places in and around Mumbai, in and around me, and try and see if I can find meaningful images and work in my surroundings. So that's on the work that I have been able to put together recently.
Yeah. Just as I asked the question, I realized that you're probably the person I've traveled with the most for wildlife photography, despite which we haven't probably done a trip together in the last 5 or 6 years, right? So going to the run of Kutch was almost like a yearly ritual for us for a long time. And I would say going to maybe Tal Chapar was like a monthly ritual when we were working together. But yeah, it's been a while since we did that. Let's see, maybe we can plan one soon. Yes, and I understand that your work is sort of moved towards more urban nature, more sort of juxtaposition of urban environments with natural elements. But I want to start this conversation with rainforests because they are a really, really dear subject to both of us, right? And in a way, some of your work in rainforests is very unique, much like all of your other work, which is that even in rainforests, you're not looking for the flagships. You're not out there to photograph a pit viper or a king cobra. You are happy photographing ferns and fungi and droplets of water on moss and so on and so forth. The more sort of commonly available subjects, but sharing very, very unique perspectives on them, right? So talk to me a little bit about your love for rainforests and how this point of view on focusing a lot more on the common things that came about.
So I'm absolutely fascinated with two ecosystems, deserts and rainforests. And I think both these ecosystems are unique. Every time I step into a rainforest, I feel that it's a land that harbors secrets that we don't fully understand. And every year we learn something new about the complex ecosystem of rainforests. I think it's a mystery of this ecosystem that really draws me to it. And in my photography, every time I have tried to make images or every time I have tried to tell a story from my perspective, I have somewhere tried to ensure that this mystery is conveyed in some form or the other. So the choice of photograph, the choice of perspectives, and the way I try to represent it in its final form is all an outcome of this thought somewhere that it needs to convey that there is something more to it than we may see as far as rainforests and the ecosystem is concerned.
So that's a very sort of good way to think about it, right? And then maybe I'll ask you another question that's sort of puzzling me. So when I go to a rainforest like be it Agumbe or Amboli, and I'm going to Amboli in a week's time, there is this target in mind. Like if I see a pit viper today in this kind of a setting, I make this kind of an image, right? So I have that in mind. If it's like, say, a particular type of frog, like the lateralis, or I haven't seen like the Amboli bush frog, if it's one of those target species, I have that in mind and I sort of go there and say this kind of an image. What is your kind of targeting in a rainforest? Because the subjects you have in mind are something that you will definitely see, right? So you don't have to work too hard, for example, to find a fern or a fungi in the rainforest. You will find mushrooms, you will find fungi. So how does the planning of a walk in the rainforest work for you?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I consciously try to do is um, while I do my homework in terms of looking through images which have been made, I also try to read as much as possible about the place that I'm going to. And this reading is not necessarily with respect to, say, scientific papers on the ecosystem. It is something that I find interesting, but it isn't something that I fully understand. But I definitely try to read up a lot about, say, for example, if somebody has written a blog on rainforest as an ecosystem, if somebody has written something that celebrates rainforests in a unique way, that is something that I'll try and read through as much as possible. I think it allows me to get into the right kind of frame of mind for me to then walk into the place and absorb the sense of place completely. And while it may sound a little philosophical, I think for me to be in that right frame of mind is extremely important, to be able to see things in the way that I want to see and to be able to connect with the subject in the way that I want to. In fact, I want to just take a step back here while you were kind enough to say that, when you go to a rainforest, you are looking for signature species, quote unquote. I think my love for rainforest actually started with the image that you made many years back, which I think got published in Better Photography and also won a contest. And that was actually my starting point, because till that point, at that point, I was just getting introduced to the idea of nature photography. I think this is in 2013-14, and I remember how much you struggled with all the expert and scientists to find out the name of the species.
Yeah.
And all this while I was really interested in finding out this excitement, I was just drawn to the sheer beauty of that particular image and how it can exist and be easily overlooked. So actually, my a lot of my work has to do with my starting point, which was basically this. And I think as artists, it is very important to ask ourselves this question: that what makes you pause? Which words, which thoughts, which images make you pause? Because these are the things that we are naturally drawn to. So somewhere it was also on my part the acceptance that this is what I'm naturally drawn to. And one of the most interesting things that came out in that function, that award ceremony, was one thing that David Zimmerman said that stayed with me even till date, where he talks about the relationship with the subject. He says the most important
Yeah.
thing in photography is your relationship with the subject. And I think that is one aspect that in my journey as a photographer, I have always tried to ask myself as to where am I with respect to the relationship of my subject. And that then eventually kind of reflects in the body of work that I will try to put together. I think that question allows me to be as honest and authentic about my work as possible. And that's something that I've also seen in the work of a lot of fellow photographers like you, Yashpal, Sumit. I think somewhere all of you are trying to define or redefine your relationship with the subject, with the landscape, with a particular species, and that eventually kind of culminates into a body of work that we all put together. So that kind of a starting point in my journey also helped me in a big way to understand that there is so much more to rainforests that we can explore and learn if we look more closely, if we look at the ecosystem a little differently. And that kind of a starting point eventually helps you understand and appreciate the subject matter in a very different way.
Thank you for the kind words about that image. That was one of my earlier images. First image, first trip to Agumbe, believe it or not. And when I shot it, I didn't know what it was. So ran head to skelter trying to find out what it was. Turned out to be a slime mold. And just for context, for everyone listening to this, the award ceremony Manish is referring to is the Better Photography Award ceremony. David Zimmerman was the judge there, and he gave a long spiel about the importance of building a strong relationship with the subject you're photographing, right? And I want to dig deeper into that because yes, Sumit and I love nature and we read as much about a place we're going to, we read the various perspectives that we're going to. But I don't think I know too many people who get to the breadth of the subject the way you do. For instance, one of your projects, one of your work is called Trees, right? And I know that it draws inspiration from a book you love, which is The Hidden Life of Trees, right? So in a way, you're able to read something as deep as that and try to bring out that emotion in your photography work. So given that you read so much, you're also reading a lot of what artists say. I know you gave me a book on Monet and said that this is the kind of images I want to make, which is kind of his art, which is from where some of your work on trees in Corbett came, right? Where you were using slow shutter to draw vertical lines across a frame and so on and so forth. So not only are you acutely sort of educated about the subjects that you want to photograph, but you're also able to layer multiple perspectives, multiple thoughts and interconnect some of these to create images which convey a very, very different emotion, a very different meaning. So how did this process come about? Are you constantly thinking of images and imagery when you're going through a certain book, which is not necessarily related to photography? Or is it that something that naturally comes to you to be able to connect multiple things that you read in different places and bring them together in an image?
I think that's a very deep question, Anubhav. And I somewhere wish that more conversations about photography in general would revolve around this specific aspect of making images, because at the end of the day, a lot of photographers that I know want to create and present unique work, and that's great. It's great to see everybody trying to see what can I do differently, what can I do in a very unique manner, because over the years photography has become easier and easier. It isn't as difficult to make an image today as it was in 2014 because of the
Yes.
advancement of equipments, technology. I mean, we know that. But I think what isn't tapped into enough is you yourself as a photographer. And I think the most unique thing in the world is who we are. So when we try to tap into that aspect of it, I think unique perspectives are bound to come about. And I think who we are a culmination of perspectives, experiences, what we know, what we have read, what we have learned, what we have engaged with, the conversations that we have had. So I think that's a broad picture, so to say. In terms of the process of image making, I sketch a fair bit. So if I have read something, then I will sketch a sketch that will only make sense to me and not to anyone else, so that I have a pictorial depiction of what it felt like when I read something in my mind. Would also try and put together a journal of all the important prompts that came to my mind when I read something or when I saw an image by some other photographer. And these prompts and these sketches forms part of my homework when I would visit a particular rainforest or an ecosystem. But I will also try as much as possible not to look at the entire body of work that would have been created in that place, so that I am not indirectly getting influenced to go and, so to say, chase the same scene, the same species, or the same perspectives. So it's a coming together of what I can do in a very authentic manner, trying to be true to myself, and at the same time draw inspiration from some amazing work that would have been done, not necessarily in form of photography, that has helped me put the two together, so to say, and create work that's that I can definitely say is authentic to who I am as an artist. Sometimes it may resonate with people, sometimes it may not resonate with people. But one of the things that I have um, evolved to accept and understand is that if uh, that I am far more comfortable with how my work is looked at today as I was, say, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, seeking validation was a very important part of what I was doing, because I was just
Yeah.
starting off on my journey. But
Yeah.
today, I am at a place where if I have been able to engage with a subject in a meaningful manner, I derive a lot of satisfaction from that process.
I mean, thank you for saying that, and thank you for speaking of the seeking validation part as well. I think one important thing for all of us who sort of picked up our cameras and went about photography, say in the 2008, 9, 10 period, maybe a little later for you, a little earlier for me, is that it sort of coincided with the rise of social media, right? So posting on social media came a little bit naturally to us. Even before social media, there was India Nature Watch, where I would post images every day. And somehow, sort of the validation seeking process became a very integral part of being a photographer. It took me a lot of time to separate that from actual quality work. Like, right now that I have permanently deleted my Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter handles, because in a way that was impacting my work. You also are very, very sort of sporadic with your posting there. But somehow, if you remember, the early days seem to be all about whether our images are getting the recognition, by which we meant validation. And it's taken, I'd say, both of us a fair bit of time to move from that to a process where it's more intrinsic and more sort of something that's bringing joy to ourselves. And it's still very much work in progress for me. Find it hard to not think about a contest when I'm in a place. But yeah, work in progress, I'd say. And another sort of very, very interesting point that you made is how you actively try to not go to the absolute depths of every single photograph that's been taken in a habitat that you're going to, which is very different from the way I approach things. Like, the first thing I do before going to a new place is look at what everyone else has done there from a photography point of view, simply so that I get an idea of how I can plan my shots better. But that's a good learning for me, which is that maybe that is in a way nudging my frame, in a way priming me to think about only certain frames and not think about in a broader sense. So yeah, maybe I'll also try thinking about, reading a bit about the place and not necessarily looking at images people have made there to help to get my own sort of perspective from there. So thank you. That totally made sense to me. You also enjoy photographing in deserts, right? Rainforest is one, but I also know that you've been to Thar a few times. Some of your beautiful images from Run of Kutch, especially the one with the abandoned flamingo's nest, is highly published. It's also a very very evocative image in that sense. So how did the love for deserts come about?
So I think the love for deserts, I think, came about from my love for rainforests because it's a completely different ecosystem, very very unique in its nature. And I think a lot of credit for my love for deserts as an ecosystem should go to Vipul Ramanuj, because I have looked through a lot of his work, and I think he engages with the subject in a very very unique manner. So I think over the years, if I have to put a process to how this for deserts as an ecosystem came about, I think it was this book read by Barry Lopez, and the work that I saw that people had put together. The two put together kind of made me fall in love with rainforest deserts as an ecosystem. And I think somewhere, if you look at rainforest, for example, a fern may form an essential element of that particular landscape. In fact, it can define that habitat single handedly. Not only that, I think if we compare it to any other species, like, say, for example, a bird or a tree, a fern can probably define and add on the Western Ghats in a
Yeah.
far more emphatic manner than a bird or a mammal can. So when we just suppose that to deserts as an ecosystem, I think the same goes for sand dunes,
Yes.
or for example, a shrub that you may see in a sand dune. I think that shrub may hold so many secrets to that ecosystem that may be very very unique in itself. And I think the love for desert basically came about from there, that again it's a landscape that harbors so many secrets, and it's so mysterious in its nature, and not enough has been done and spoken about it. So I thought these two ecosystems had something unique about them, something mysterious about them, and there was some connection that I could feel to both these ecosystems, which then allowed me to explore them on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a fern represents a rainforest much more than a gliding frog does. Likewise, something like a cagery may represent arid, grassland a lot more than, say, a black buck does, right? So that's a very interesting point. Hadn't thought about it that way. Also made me realize that despite the many times I've been to Bikaner and Chapar and Thar, I don't have a good shot of a cagery that I'd be happy to print. So maybe that can be something that I can work on next. I've also noticed that your work on deserts, like how you speak about sort of the dunes, just the patterns in the dunes. I think you have an entire series of just dunes and dune patterns, right? And you've also got a lot of series which are on the theme of minimalism, right? And there is a use of space and there is a vast negative space, almost sort of highlighting the vastness of the desert in the background there as much as they are the species. And sometimes I wonder whether your background is actually your main subject that you're trying to highlight. So talk to me a little bit about how you developed some of these frames and how the thinking on minimalism came about.
So I think that entire series on sand dunes which is called Portraits of a Desert, is basically inspired by this thought that that is one ecosystem that's not going to be the same in an hour from now, in a day from now. It's a shape shifting ecosystem, and it continues to harbor the amazing amount of biodiversity that it harbors. Is there a way for me to capture that in my images? So the idea was to start there and see if I can portray the nature of this shape shifting ecosystem in a way that conveys the mystery about it. So the choice of using monochromatic images also came from there, because I thought in that body of work I didn't want the viewer to worry too much about if the sky is too blue or the sand is too yellow. And that allowed me to focus the the attention of somebody who may find that work interesting completely on sand dunes and the shapes and contours of the dunes. So that's how that work came about. And I think if we think really deeply about this particular subject, I think Arti Kumar Rao talks about this in the first chapter of her book as well, about
Margin
how
lands.
margin lands, about how people in and around the who live on the fringes of the desert have also found a unique way to kind of develop a very unique relationship with that ecosystem. It's a relationship that will take years for us to understand, but it's an interdependent relationship that we must recognize and celebrate, so that we can celebrate the ecosystem as ecosystem in general. Overall, I think it continues to be an ecosystem that inspires me. It motivates me to explore it more and more. But obviously, in the last few years, I have not been able to do it as much as I would have wanted.
On the theme of black and white and monochromatic images, I've noticed that deserts aren't the only place where black and white is your go-to mode of photography. You've done that as much in rainforests. You've done that as much in Corbett, which is actually one of the most colorful jungles in India. So, what's the reason for monochromatic images, and how did that deliberate choice come into your photography?
So I think a lot of it comes from the feeling that I'm trying to convey, and I think it should that should always be the starting point. The feeling that you are trying to convey, or the story that you are trying to tell. I don't think the starting point for anyone should be the choice of monochrome versus color when we are presenting an image. In my case, I think it becomes a natural choice for me, because I feel that when I am trying to convey a sense of time and a sense of place, I think it can happen in a much better way for me when the choice of communication is a monochromatic image as compared to, say, for example, a color image. And I think over the years, I mean, photography has continued to capture a reality in 2D, leaving very little to the imagination of the viewer. So one of the things that I consciously try to do is, how do I try and weave a visual narrative that will leave something to the imagination of the viewer. And I believe that I can convey it better when the choice of image is monochrome versus. But obviously, there are enough opportunities for us to do the same thing in color as well. When it
Right.
comes to Corbett, I think it lends itself very naturally to this idea of there is more to it than what you see, because how beautiful that forest is, and how gigantic those salt trees are, how beautifully uh, those roads in the forest curve, and how beautifully you may see a flower that has fallen from the tree, accept its fate. I think there is something very poetic about Corbett, and I wish I could spend more time in Dikala. That is one place where I want to spend as much time as possible, but for
Yes.
reasons that all of us know, it has become more and more difficult over the years to get access to that place. So yeah, that's a bit on Corbett.
Yeah, I think this is why I really enjoy talking some of these things with you, because most photographers, myself included, when we talk about Dikala, we will talk about elephants in the grassland. We will talk about elephants walking through those salt trees. We will talk about a tiger in the grassland. We will talk about elephants bathing in the river there. But there's very few people who talk about a flower has fallen on the ground and accepting its fate and putting it in the context of the salt trees there and so on and so forth, which is why yours is probably one of the most unique perspectives in photography that I've personally known. And I think, in a way, and help me understand this a bit better, your choice of equipment is also defined by the choice of story and the emotions you want to convey. I know that after you made a couple of visits to Dikala is when you decided to invest in a Lensbaby as well as a tilt shift lens. And even though those two lenses aren't traditional nature photography lenses, they are more architecture type lenses, you decided to invest in them and create some beautiful images of elephants walking through those sad trees in Tikara, right? So and I really love some of that work. How did that thinking come about?
Sure. So I think all of us have looked through the work of Ganesh Shankar, and we have been really inspired by how he chose to be true and authentic to himself. At a time when I was just starting out, and I was just trying to ensure that I managed to take a sharp photograph. So I think, when again going back to the conversation that we had about, it's what pauses us when we look at something is an important question to ask, because I think there lies answers about what we are naturally drawn to. And his work was a huge inspiration, and probably the only photographer's work where I tried to get into details of how did he make that image, what equipment he must have used. I think that question never came to my mind when I looked at anyone else's work, but when I looked at his work, the kind of the sense of place, the sense of time, and the mystery that he could convey in his images were so unique that I had to find out how that image was made. And it was a conversation between the two of us where you told me that, this kind of a perspective is only possible through a tilt shift lens. So I have to be honest about it. I think that's when I said, okay, I cannot invest in a traditional expensive tilt shift lens. So Lensbaby became the natural choice, and it was an extremely frustrating experience to photograph with the Lensbaby, because that is one lens that gets nothing right. It's a lens that is meant to make amazing portraits when you have everything set up and you have taken enough test shots. And I don't know about the Lensbaby equipment of today. I'm talking about the Lensbaby equipment that I had acquired 10 years ago, when I had to ask a friend from coming from the US to get some lenses for me. So it was a very, very frustrating experience. But when it gets it right, I think it's a very, very rewarding image. And somewhere that also helped me become more patient with the kind of work that I was doing. And I was actually very, very happy about it, because then I wasn't trigger happy shooting, 25 images a second. I had to really wait and just make maybe two, maybe three images to ensure that I get it absolutely right. Because a lot of times there will be issues with buffering, there'll be issues with camera reading the scene correctly, because it wouldn't identify Lensbaby
Yeah.
as a lens that was natural to its overall ergonomics and technology. So it was a very rewarding experience in the end, and I'm very, very happy with the work that I could put together using the Lensbaby. I've got more wrong than right with that particular lens, and there are so many what could have been still there in my hard drive. But in the hindsight, I think there are times when the equipment helps us evolve as artists, and I think Lensbaby definitely was that. And then I think a few years back, I decided to acquire a tilt shift lens, again with the same objective. I think it is like, if I am making a painting, then my choice of a brush should be defined by what I want to convey. So in this case, for photographers, a choice of brush is an equivalent of choice of equipment, and a tilt shift lens could allow me to convey the mystery, the drama, leave a lot to the imagination of the viewer in a very meaningful manner. And therefore, that's the story of Lensbaby and tilt shift lenses.
Oh, number of things in what you said that I want to sort of dig into, which is firstly, yeah, Ganesh Shankar has been a huge inspiration to both of us. I remember, I think in the early days, we'd sit for hours in front of some of his images, trying to figure out how has he got this perspective, what has he done there. I mean, he is kind enough to just tell you if you ask him. But yeah, little did we know back then. I think much later, you and I met him in different sort of forums, and he's the nicest sort of photographer, nicest person I've come across, who's so happy to share everything about his work, and somebody that we both look up to. So yes, I mean, I tried to copy some of the things that he does and fail miserably. That's for a different day. The other thing is, was in a conversation with Yashpal recently, and he mentioned the same thing about the process and the failure that comes with it. Like he sets up camera traps in tiger parks, and he was telling me how one of his favorite images took about 7 years to come about, right? And that's the kind of effort that goes into it, right? That put a camera trap somewhere, you sort of wait for it, and so on and so forth. And frustrating as it can be, sort of when you're doing it, it's when you look back that you realize that you really enjoyed the process of that failure. For example, I've been trying to photograph the spiny-tailed lizard in Thar for a long time, and I still don't have like the best sort of image there. But I've been at it since maybe 2013, 2014 with all kinds of cameras set up there, and I definitely fail more often than I succeed, right? In maybe 3 or 4 trips that I make there, I get one image which I'm okay with, right? And I think, yeah, I think failing more than you sort of succeed and accepting that is an important part of nature and wildlife photography overall, even more so in the kind of work that you're doing. So yeah, thank you for that. You know, it also got me wondering, given the kind of images that you sort of typically create, how much of the image is something that you have in mind when you're getting it in your sensor, and how much of that image is something that you work on while you're at Lightroom? Are there images that you like when you're shooting? Do you know exactly the way you're going to process it? Or does that change once you look at it on Lightroom and then you spend maybe a few more hours there trying to sort of bring out the best version of it there?
Again, I think, Anirudh, that's a very very deep question. I think, in all honesty, a lot of it is visualized with the use of sketches, with the use of word prompts, not necessarily in the form of, okay, this is the exact setting I'm looking for. But for example, just to ensure that this doesn't become everything about imagination, and there is enough for the listeners to kind of take away from it if they find my work meaningful, I think their imagination would look something like, if there is a salt tree and if I find a subject walking, then this is the kind of image that can come about. Or, for example, if there is a grassland and if there is a blade of grass that I can get very close to, then this is the kind of image that can be made. I think those are things that I might have pre-visualized with the use of sketches. But I think it's equally important to not think too much about it, because then it doesn't allow us to be in the moment and enjoy the moment and really appreciate what may unfold in front of us. So if we are so conditioned by the visualized image, then that may take away from a completely different scene that may be panning out in front of you. So I think it helps to have some amount of pre-visualization and some amount of understanding of the ecosystem. I think a lot of the times, for example, when I look through images, it allows me to understand where the photographer was standing, which is a very very important question. Or where, how they might have positioned their vehicle, what time of the day this kind of a scene can possibly take place. I think those visualizations are important. And then we have to embrace whatever mother nature kind of presents in front of us. I think over the years I have also started to appreciate how lucky we are to be living in such a beautiful world and to have the opportunity to be in the lap of mother nature as many times as we get to do that. I think somewhere it is also a recognition of what life has kind of presented us with, and appreciation for that should come first, and everything else should ideally follow second. I mean, even at the cost of sounding preachy, I think it is very very important. Somewhere all of us get into that zone of, this is the image I'm chasing, or this is the species I'm chasing. I think somewhere we don't appreciate the beauty of nature enough. Or let me say, there is more to appreciation of beauty of nature than what we may see very very clearly. On what you mentioned some time back, I think there should be a separate podcast on things we learn from fellow photographers and friends. I
Sure.
think it should be about one thing that every photographer said that stayed with us for a long time. For
Yeah.
example, Yashpal once told me that, Manish, a photographer like you should ask a question: what would your work look like if there was no social media? And I was like, wow, this is not a nudge. This is him pushing me in the direction of, do what you truly enjoy and stay true to it. So I think there are many such gems that we can put together, which we learn from many photographers, and it would make for a great podcast.
Oh, for sure. That is a great idea, and we should do that, right? And I think the one common thing that has come through all the discussions I've been having with all photographers is sort of everyone I've spoken to says there's photography, but the broader aspect of it is nature, right? So it's almost like photography is our tool to be connected to nature as much as we can. It's definitely the case for me. I think the point you missed about my earlier question was on editing, right? There's pre-visualization while going into the field. But what I want to understand is, given how significantly images, especially black and white, can change on Lightroom, do you also come back to the Lightroom and think about it and say, hey, this could be a very different image if I process it this way? And do you have some image examples like that, which was very different when you made it in the field, but then you start editing and realize that, hey, this is how I want to present it? And I'm asking this from the point of being ignorant about black and white photography, right? I'm not, I mean, you can see that some of the frames behind me are black and white, but these are the exceptions and not the norm. You know that most of my work is color. And I see you as somebody who makes really, really outstanding black and white. And that's where this is coming from.
So I think you are being very very humble about it, Andrew. I think you made some exceptionally amazing black and white images as well. I
Thank you.
think when it comes to post processing, my relationship with post processing, like my relationship with photography, has also evolved over a period of time, and now I am much more open to the idea of post processing to ensure that it conveys the feeling that I want to convey. I think that's the only benchmark. That wouldn't mean that I'll completely replace a tree or a tiger or a deer in the frame. But for example, if I feel that a more dramatic treatment to the sky may convey a greater sense of drama, then I would just go for it. Maybe run it past a couple of photographers to check if I have gone overboard. Because you told me many years back something that again stayed with me, which is that I can tell you what the slider will do. I can't tell you or teach you how much you need to pull it. So, I think we were discussing saturation at that point, and I was never happy with how blue my sky was versus your sky. So, I think those things uh, are very, very important. I think every photographer to each his or her own, I guess. When it comes to post processing, in my case, I have just one filter. If I am able to convey the feeling that I want to convey with the final image that I am trying to present, because if you look at the old age darkroom techniques that photographers used to
Yeah,
deploy in the film photography days, I think they used to completely
yeah,
change the
of
image.
course.
Obviously, they were dealing with much more number of limitations as compared to what we may be dealing with. So I don't necessarily look at it as quote unquote a right or a wrong thing to do. I think every photographer should have the freedom to define it for himself or herself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you said this is what I said to you, I was a little worried that it could have been any number of the things that I've said to you, some of which can't be shared on this podcast. But I'm glad you came up with that one example and not something else. But that's something I tell in most of the post processing workshops that I conduct, which is that I can tell you what a slider does, but how much you want to take it up or take it down is entirely up to you, and that depends on your aesthetic. And yeah, and for me, the most important consideration there is how close am I bringing that image to what I saw? Because our eyes are the best recording devices, and despite the best cameras we have, they don't record images the same way. So yeah, that's my philosophy on that. So yeah,
One of the things that uh, one of the things that I have learned to accept over a period of time is that when it comes to color versus a black and white photograph, one big reason why my I end up choosing monochrome is sometimes when I don't want the conversation to be about how green that tree is, or how yellow the grass is, and I think a monochromatic image allows me to do that. So I mean, I just kind of wanted to add that sometimes in an image, if you just want to take the attention of the viewer away from how dramatic the sky might be, or how amazing the sunset is, and want the attention of the viewer to completely focus on, for example, trees swaying in the wind, then I think the choice of medium can also the choice of final treatment of the image can also be an outcome of.
for sure. And yeah, monochromatic takes away all of those distracting things and the takes away most distractions for that matter, right? And yeah, most of the sky images I've shot in Kenya, which I think is in Masai Mara at least, where the sky is the most beautiful. Both of us sort of have chatted about this, are always in black and white, because I just want to talk about the patterns of the clouds in the sky and not necessarily like how blue the sky is. So yeah, during COVID, most of us were impacted by it. And while I was looking for things around the house to photograph, like more urban, easily available wildlife like mynas and a lot of black light images from my balcony in Bombay, you sort of went the other way and you picked out some of your older wildlife photographs and you juxtapose them with some patterns in the city. And I think that is some really, really epic work that I've seen. How did that come about?
Thank you so much, first of all. That work is very, very close to my heart. And I think over a period of time, my relationship with photography as a medium has evolved. I think COVID was that time when I had a lot of time to spend with the images that I had made. And that was also a time when we spent a lot of time with ourselves. So, somewhere a realization dawned onto me that I'm spending a lot more time at home with books than I'm spending, say, traveling for photography. So a question came about, should photography necessarily be a means to an end, or can it be a tool that we use to understand things better, understand our relationship with the world better? And that question then led me to look through my phone screen, and I saw two images naturally placed next to each other. And I thought, interesting, this might be an interesting way of looking at things. And as I kept on building that body of work, I realized that it allowed me to understand and question the stark contrast that exists in the world that we live in. It was my first interaction with this medium where I was just asking questions, and I wasn't kind of necessarily comfortable with those images that I made. And I think one reason why it resonated with a lot of fellow photographers is also because somewhere they are very close to nature, and they were also asking the same questions. So that body of work is now close to 50 odd images, and someday I hope it will be something more than just images in my hard drive or on my website. I am in the process of thinking through what could be the logical next step for these images, but it was just a great exploration for me in terms of my engagement with this medium of art, that it can just go beyond documenting, creating, and expressing, and can also be used to engage, to interact, to probe, to understand, and to explore relationships with the broader aspects of our lives.
Yeah, and I think you've also started using words in your photography, in the sense not necessarily a caption, but a written text or a part of a poem that is there, and that adds so much more meaning and emotion into a photograph, right? And it sort of nudges the viewer to think about what thoughts you had when you did that. So, do you also write those words, or is it something that you've read somewhere? And how did this come about, which is in terms of putting words along with the photograph to sort of convey so much more deeper meaning through it?
I think again that relationship has evolved, Anurup. There was a time in my life when I would not want to write about it, saying, hey, my photograph should be enough to convey what I want to convey. But sometimes I think some of this kind of work also requires a little bit of a nudge in the right direction. And I have learned to use words to kind of complement the images that I'm making, to add more meaning to it, get the viewer to think, probe, ask further questions into what he or she may be looking at. And yes, these are things that I will write on my own, and most of it is stream of consciousness kind of writing. And then when I end up finding the right kind of an image, I'll put the two together and see, okay, sometimes what also started to happen was words started to inspire what I was going to create, because
Yeah.
all these images were already created and I didn't have access to new images at all. So sometimes the choice of writing the way I would write something also started to inspire the kind of images I will choose in the diptych presentation of a particular image. So it has kind of worked both ways. And I was very, very happy with the fact that now there is another tool in my toolkit that I can meaningfully use to bring the images and the emotions and the feelings to life.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of how some of your work is going to live beyond your website, and what the next step is, you are thinking of putting a book through, right? I know that I've seen some work in progress shapes of that book. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So it came about in a workshop that I participated in. The workshop is conducted by Indrajit Sithambe. I would highly recommend all photographers to attend that workshop once, specifically if you are looking at creating a meaningful story from your surroundings. I think that's a very important filter there, because it's a very intensive 8 week workshop, and you have the opportunity to create a story and get them great work critique by Indrajit and some of the fellow participants. So this body of work came together as part of that particular workshop. And this is where I think it is also incredibly important to not shy away from asking for help, or not shy away from asking someone to mentor you, guide you, or look through your images. I think as photographers, a lot of times we hesitate in doing that for reasons which only we may know. But I think there is value in reaching out, asking for help. Sometimes it helps to get a very objective view on your body of work, not only in terms of what I should photograph, but more in terms of, is there an opportunity for me to build a body of work around? So, the book that you are referring to is a book on the modern day misnomer of the arrival fallacy. It explores a concept, which is why it is a bit difficult for me to put the pieces together, and it continues to go back and forth, and I'm really struggling to. It's almost like a jigsaw puzzle that needs to come together in the most meaningful way, because what you are trying to convey is a concept and not necessarily the image on its own. So all
Yeah.
images together need to make sense. It needs to lead the viewer who has chosen to engage with that particular subject from point A to point B to point C in the most meaningful manner, understanding what I'm trying to convey, and at the same time asking the right questions. So again, the choice of words is very, very important. Yes, that book is coming together, and maybe I'll share some images with you here, along with the overall idea of the concept, and hopefully I will be able to put the puzzle together. But again, there is no pressure on timelines. It's something that's deeply personal to me, and it's using and exploring a completely different aspect of my personal life while using nature as the motif, as the canvas to draw inspiration from. So,
Yeah.
given how complex this whole idea is, I am very patient with myself, and it's going to take a little while. But I hope that when it comes together, it will be something meaningful.
I can't wait to get my hands on the book. I've seen a few of the uh, initial images put next to each other, and just the simple and the sheer contrast between two images has got me thinking so much, right? So yeah, wish you good luck with that. So when you think about sort of your journey, right, you started off as proper nature and wildlife, like every weekend you want to Thar Chapper, Agumbe, all of these places, and then you sort of progressed from that into doing photography in nature in a very different way. You spend a lot of time, absorb a lot of context from sort of parallel streams on that, to now juxtaposing between nature and urban life. And now most of your photography is sort of urban in nature, right? And it's largely in Mumbai, around the areas that we stay in, and so on and so forth. Do you miss sort of having a large photography bag, long lens, all of that, waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, wanting to be the first in a safari, waiting for sort of Hariji to wake up so that we can get into Thalcha, pursue all of that? Is there a part of you that misses that, or you're like, okay, to do what you're doing right now?
Well, if I have to be very honest, that's one part of photography that I definitely don't miss. I think hats off to photographers who do that day in and day out. I mean, I have seen the passion and rigor that you have put into a lot of your work. Sumit has put in, Yashpal has put in, and many other photographers that we know have been putting in over the years. Sometimes I am honestly amazed at the amount of commitment that you guys demonstrate, because it's not easy. But again, you find, for you, it's work that seems like play to you, because
Yeah.
it's something that you derive a lot of meaning in. It is something that you find deeply meaningful, and I'm excited about the thrill of doing that, but I don't think I'm excited about doing it day in and day out anymore. And I have absolutely nothing against it. I'm all for it, and someday I would love to go on a safari, all of us together, one more time, and it will be a lot of fun. But I think my practice has evolved, because I think, in all honesty, we have to be cognizant of our context and the life that we are leading. So my work has moved from exploration to awareness over a period of time. And the more aware I became of my own surroundings, the more personal my projects became. I think personal projects are also a great way to express yourself. I think the most unique thing in this world, like I
Yeah,
said, is you. And when we choose to explore the inner landscape, it's full of stories and narratives that are waiting to be told. And maybe all of it may not find an audience, but it will be a deeply engaging exploration of what you hold. So
100%.
that's the direction in which my work is currently moving. But I mean, I cannot wait to go on a safari with all of you. It is something that I am very, very excited to do.
No, fair. I think the whole thing about personal projects and the importance of doing projects that matter to you. I think there's this book you gifted to me, which is by Rick Rubin, The Creative Way of Being. It sort of is the essence of that, right? Where he speaks about the most important work, trying being the thing that's most meaningful to you, and not necessarily sort of the things that are most popular. And it's hard. We at the outset seem to agree with it, but it's hard to sort of pursue it, right? I think that's all I had to ask. But one last sort of thing which I always ask everyone is, what's your suggestion to somebody who's just picked up a camera a few years ago and is figuring things out, and how would you like them to go about their craft?
So I think I don't even know if I am the right person to, answer that question. I think there are many other people who can do it in a much more meaningful way. Primarily because if you look at all the common filters in a world that literally worships at the altar of success, I don't think I feature there at all. But maybe the right reason to listen to what I have to say is because I definitely feel that I have managed to find meaning in the way of being using photography as a medium of art. And I think all of the people who are just starting off, they should just do whatever they enjoy doing, but constantly ask yourself if you are being true to who you are, and if you are doing what you enjoy doing. Because the world that we live in, it's very, very easy to start doing something that you never wanted to do in the first place, because there is that one part that gets you validation, that gets you recognition, and then there is that other path, maybe a completely different path, where you and your authenticity and your relationship with the medium of art lies. If these paths converge, great. But if these paths don't converge, then it will be very, very difficult to find meaning in something like photography or any form of art where the only criteria of success is validation from the external world. So do it because you want to be true and authentic to yourself. Of course, I mean, if getting validation, winning awards, and trying to make an image that gets published, gets recognized, drives you, great, go for it, by all means. But if it can also be a medium that can help you find yourself, discover yourself, explore your relationships with the surroundings, explore your relationship with the spaces that you share, the people you live with. So there is value in exploring those relationships as well. And I would just give a gentle nudge to say the best work lies in your surroundings. So go explore that work. There is a lot of meaning to be found in that kind of personal work. At the same time, I also want to say that at the end of the day, we do this because we love the idea of spending time in nature. And that is something that all of us need to do more and more and more, because it's very important that we inspire the future generations to share a deeply meaningful, deeply engaging, deeply connected relationship with nature. It's a beautiful world that we all need to preserve. And spending time in nature and sharing images of what we saw can be the easiest way to get someone else to connect with this beautiful world that we live in. So that's something that all of us should do more of. Absolutely all for it. So yeah, those are my two bits on somebody who may be just starting.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for being your honest, humble, authentic self. And I know you very well, so I know everything you said here came sort of straight from the heart. So thank you for saying that. And with respect to sort of worshipping on the altar of success, I think that you're probably one of the most successful nature photographers that I know of, if you not stick to the sort of narrow definition of success, and simply by going by the nature of work you've put up. Thank you for spending this time here, and hope you have a great rest of the day, rest of the year, and good luck with the book.
Thank you so much, Anurup. I think I must admire and appreciate how open you are to diverse point of views. And I think it takes a lot to engage someone in a meaningful conversation, because it starts with your openness to other person's point of views. And over the years, I think as a friend and a fellow photographer, you have allowed me to go in directions that I really wanted to go, and always encouraged me when I went in those directions. And I hope that photography becomes a lot more fun. Any form of art becomes a lot more fun when you have the right kind of company with you, right sort of friends
100%.
with you, who not only help you learn, but who also allow you to grow and evolve. So I am incredibly lucky that I have friends like you and Sumit who have allowed me to do that over the years. And that's something that's more meaningful than anything else, any award,
Wow.
any recognition that we
No,
may-
likewise. Just occurred to me that some of my best friends are all photographers, and we started off on this photography journey sort of together. And yeah, that's a good place to be. Thank you for those warm words, and yeah, have a good day. Thank you for time here again. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.